so much of what happens in our day in and day out life is a matter of timing. Schedules, deadlines, wake up time, go to bed time, eat time. Downton Abbey runs on a schedule. And so does Christ Church, in case anybody ever asks you. But I was thinking about timing and how important it is as Christians to be alert to the opportunities that will come and go around us all of the time. If we're not watching the world around us and listening and trying to see what God has in mind for us, if we're so wrapped up in what we dare to call our own time, I have my time, we have our time, but we really need to be living in God's time so that we can see the whole picture and follow where He's going to lead us and let Him set a schedule for us. That's not easy to do. Reconciling two people's schedules is not always easy. Let me give you an example. When Terry and I were thinking, which we occasionally do, we were thinking last Monday that we had 1 week before we would be leaving to go to Nashotah House. And Terry looked out into our backyard, which was the subject of a sermon about 1.5 years ago, you may recall. It's where they could film a variety of horror stories. And it hasn't gotten a whole lot better. And so she said, we've only got a week. If we want to plan for the landscaping work this summer, we really should do that before we leave. So we were driving in the car together a little later that day. She was driving. I got my phone out, and I said, I'm going to call Company X about the landscaping. I'm calling it Company X because I've been here in Christ Church long enough to know that if I actually named the company, one of you either owns it or your cousin does. And I don't want anybody to lose their job. So I called Company X, and the phone rang 17 times. We were calling them because we had bought some things from them, especially our Christmas trees the last couple of years, and loved them. So I thought, this is a first-rate company. It's locally owned, and that's who I want to do my work for me. So I called, and the phone rang 17 times, and finally a lady answered and said, Company X. And she said, I'd like to speak to someone in the landscaping department. Said, you have to call 447-3221. Bye. She was very busy. Her schedule didn't mesh with mine, apparently. So I did my best. Miraculously, I remembered the number that she had given me one time quickly and called it. And the phone rang 17 times again, and before anyone picked up. And finally, it was picked up by an answering system. And they said, listen carefully, all of our options have changed. When? Back about 1973 or so? So I got through, and finally number 8, listening patiently to this, number 8 was, if you want to speak to the contracting department, press 8. So I pressed 8, the phone rang 6 times, and another voice message came on. We can't take your call right now, but if you'd like to leave us a message, press 2. So I pressed 2 and very quickly got this message: the general delivery message box is not available. Please call another time. Being a fairly hopeful person, looking for joyful outcomes and confident that God is in control, I said to Terry, let's just go there. It's more or less on the way home. They're so busy that they can't even change and listen to their messages. So let's go see what we can find out. And our goal was just to get an appointment with someone later that week before we leave for Wisconsin tomorrow. So we parked in the parking lot of the company and found our way through all of the plants to the building marked landscaping office. And there was only one door in, and I got to that door, and on it in big letters was a sign that said, employees only beyond this point. So I can't call them and I can't go in there. I made up my mind to break the door open a little bit and put my head in, and there was a man standing there who was busy and grumpy. And he looked at me like, "Can't you see? It says employees only in here." And I said, "I'd just like to ask someone for an appointment to come to our house to look at our backyard, give us some ideas this week." He pointed to a lady 2 cubicles over and said, "She can do that." So I got up my courage and actually stepped into the office, walked over to the lady, put myself in front of her, explained the need, and she said, "Leave your name and phone number and they'll call you next week." I said, "That doesn't actually work. We're here to try to make an appointment so that someone can see us this week." She says, "Well, I can put that you're in a hurry and maybe they'll call you back this week before the end of the week." This was Monday. And I said, you're not hearing me. We don't want to repeat all of this. We just want to know whether someone can come this week or not. She said, "Well, they're very busy. They set their own schedules. I don't tell them what to do, and they can't just drop everything because you're calling in." I said, "Maybe I need to call someone else." She said, "I can have them call you next week." And we said goodbye. So that was fairly, my hopefulness and my outlook of joyfulness was giving way to pessimism, which it usually doesn't. And then I decided that for this sermon I would use this story to make lemonade out of lemons. Because what we experienced is very much like what Jesus Christ experiences trying to get his foot in the door with us so much of the time. Think about that. You've seen it, maybe there's a painting that's famous. It's reproduced in Sunday school classes. I would be shocked if there isn't one around Christ Church somewhere that shows Jesus standing at the door, knocking, trying to get his way in, and he's holding a little candle-lit lantern, and he's knocking on the door in the garden. The door is closed, and you know what's good about that door? There's no knob on the outside of it. You have to open the door to let Jesus in. He knocks all the time. He doesn't go away. He doesn't give up on us. But are you sending his calls straight to voicemail? Could be. So what do we do about that? We begin to try to live as though we are in God's time and not our own. And it means we put our schedules, our priorities, our ideas aside and begin to say, "Lord, what's the day going to be like?" Do you realize that time is the one universally, evenly given gift that God gives to every one of us? Every day that one of us is alive, we have the same amount of time as everybody else is alive that day. It is limited, but it's the same for all of us. And it's that way day in and day out as long as our days last. But our days don't last long. Remember that passage from Psalm 39? You've given us a mere handful of days. Our lifetime is as nothing in your sight. We don't even have any time that is really our own when we've given ourselves to Jesus Christ. Because we die to ourselves when we begin to live and think and act and be like Jesus. That's the goal of this whole Believe curriculum that we've been studying. And today we're about offering our time. And how much time do we make available to Jesus Christ? Is it all or nothing or a little in between? Tough to see, isn't it? Think about those disciples today at the end of the gospel reading. It's the key circle, the inner circle of Jesus' closest. Andrew and Peter and James and John. And when Jesus goes by and makes the call to them, they respond immediately. And the force of the Greek word immediately, that gets translated immediately, is right now, no hesitation, and no turning back. It is decisive. I wonder how they did that. It's possible, in fact, it's likely, that all four of these guys were not meeting Jesus for the first time. The beginning of the gospel shows him moving from Nazareth into Capernaum. Capernaum was a big city, a busy city, a fishing town on the coast, and a place for Jesus to come and go and be his base of operation. And it says he began to preach, so it's likely that these four guys had already heard something of Jesus and maybe, very likely, heard him themselves. Two of them were disciples of John the Baptist. We learn that from the Gospel of St. John. So this wasn't exactly the first meeting, but it was maybe the first invitation, the first direct call to them, and they didn't let it go to voicemail. They responded immediately. They were open, they were ready, they were looking, they saw the opportunity, and they took it. And from that day on, their life was never their own again. We need to make the same kind of offering. When we offer bread and wine at the Eucharist, and Jesus takes that and accepts it, and God blesses it and gives it back to us as our spiritual food and drink. The same kind of offering and return to us comes when we give our time or when we give our money. All of that comes back to us consecrated for God's purposes, and we begin to spread it out and use it differently. So this morning, this is a chance for us to think about how we respond to God's calls. If you're here this morning and you've never actually taken his call, if you've never actually picked it up, then today is your chance. Have you got time to take his call? Amen.
Amen. Amen.